Hilarious Children. True Tales of Funny Kids' Experiences. Collected by Leroy Vincent. Narrated by Susan Scher. Story 1. A funny baby story I know is when I was helping my best friend at the time babysit her little brother. We weren't too familiar with babies, but had helped her mom out enough that she would go to the store and trust us with the little guy. Well, when we were changing his diaper, we took off his old one and left it way too close to his hands. He grabbed it and threw his little poop all over the room. Us being young, well, we screamed and ran out of the room, which led him to follow us out the door, diaperless. We couldn't stop laughing at him, thinking it was so funny. He ran us out of the room. There was a mess to clean up, but it's a classic funny baby story. Story 2. Note, mate here means friend. When my DD1 was about 11 months old, I was changing her nappy on the floor and putting her pajamas on. OH's mate was there. He's a really cool guy who dresses amazingly well, is in a band, and doesn't do relationships or kids, etc. He was waiting for OH to get ready because they were going out. The tab came off the nappy I had, so I went into the kitchen to get another one. OH's mate shouted through to me that DD had crawled off the rug she was lying on. I asked him to put her back on it because we had tile floors at the time and she was naked. I got to the living room door just as he picked her up, and she had a diarrhea explosion all over him. It was all over his nice jacket, his t-shirt, his jeans. He was in total shock. He just handed DD1 to me and mumbled something about getting changed while I apologized over and over. I had to give him some of my OH's clothes to go home in. He still talks about it, and DD1 is 15 now and is mortified when he mentions it. Story 3. When I was a baby, there was a time when my parents asked my older sister to go into the next room to check on me and see what I was doing. My 4-year-old sister went into the room and reported back to my parents, "He's with the cat." Well, we didn't have a cat. My parents screamed, "What cat?" So they went into the next room to find me laughing and playing with a cat. I guess the cat had wandered in from outside and I picked it up and played with it totally unfazed. They took a great photo and then sent the cat outside on its way. Story 4. The Ant and the Grasshopper. One summer's day in a field, a grasshopper was hopping about, chirping and singing to its heart's content. An ant passed by, bearing along with great effort an ear of corn he was taking to his bed. "Why don't you come and chat with me?" asked the grasshopper, "instead of toiling your life away?" "Well, I'm helping to store up food for the winter," said the ant, "and I recommend you do the same." "Why bother about winter?" said the grasshopper. "We've got plenty of food at present." Short story, but the ant went on its way and continued its toil. When the winter came, the grasshopper found itself dying of hunger, while it saw the ant distributing every day corn and grain from the stores they had collected in summer. Then the grasshopper knew. Moral: work today and you can reap the benefits tomorrow. Story 5. For some strange reason yesterday, my little girl wanted us to karate chop the Thanksgiving turkey to smithereens. She kept screaming, chop it, and doing chopping symbols with her hands. Only when we pretended to beat the crap out of the bird was she satisfied. Story 6. After I had my first son via C-section, I felt so alive, vibrant, and blissfully happy. I remember feeling beautiful, gorgeous, and radiant in that hospital gown. I gleefully let family take any and all pictures of me. I was on top of the world in a joy that knew no bounds. This was in the olden days when pictures had to be developed. When I finally saw myself, I saw a bloated, sickly-looking person with an ashen pallor and crazy eyes. Yeah, morphine is powerful stuff. Story 7. When my daughter was 2, she was very advanced with her speech. Yes, I was proud of her, and one day I was at the supermarket and pulled a ticket for the queue for some cheese. My DD was in the trolley and tried to tap the lady standing by her. The woman was dripping in expensive clothes and wore a designer coat that was orange with unusual black markings on it. The woman turned to me and said what a gorgeous little girl I had and that she looked like Shirley Temple, which she did, and said to my Dee Dee, "What do you want, lovely? You were tapping my arm, weren't you?" And Dee Dee said, "You look like a giraffe in that funny coat." OMG, I was red as hell. I walked away, hissed at my mother, "Go get the trolley." My mother said, "Oh, God, what's she done now?" I said, "Just go and get the trolley. I'll tell you later." And now my Dee Dee is 27 and has 3 kids of her own and sometimes says, "Oh, Mom, I was so embarrassed today. Guess what this one said?" LOL, oh yes, I know what it's like to be an embarrassed mum. Story 8. My niece was 2 months old and she needed some tummy time to help strengthen her back, shoulders, and arm muscles. Well, she was sporting a smattering of the beginnings of a diaper rash, so we decided to let her air out at the same time. Well, all was good for the first 5 minutes, and then it happened. A squirting rainbow of baby poo. It was a perfect arc that landed on the carpet 2 feet away from her little bottom. Luckily, my brother-in-law was still at work, so my sister, in a fit of hysterics and giggle fest, set about cleaning up the carpet and the baby. Suffice to say, that was the last time my niece had free girl tummy time. Story 9. When I was little, my mom would leave me with my younger brother to watch television. We were 9 years apart, so I was too young to really bother paying attention to him often. One time, my mom left us to watch television while she did the laundry. When she came back, she sat to watch us for a little bit. My brother was in his playpen and he was facing the television. My mother sat on the couch behind the playpen so she could only see my brother's back. After a while, my brother made a squeaking noise. I looked over at him and saw that his face was completely brown. I screamed and my mom looked over at him. We both realized that he had been playing with his own poop. He had smeared it all over the bottom of the playpen. He'd gotten it all over his tiny body. However, worst of all was that he had gotten it all over his face. He looked as if he had done some face painting to look brown. My mom and I spent the next hour bathing him and cleaning the disaster he had made. Story 10. When I first came home from the hospital with my baby, I learned that he loved music. Music makes him laugh when he's sad. Music helps him relax when he's sleepy. He likes to bounce to the beat on his little baby feet. I started doing the patty cake song to get him to stop crying. He loved the patty cake song so much, he began to clap and to forget he was upset. I began to do the patty cake song every time he got upset. As a result of this practice, every time he gets upset now, he claps his hands together to let me know. He's very afraid of strangers, but they think he wants to play because he starts to clap. When he's hungry, he claps his hands together. When he gets a boo-boo, he claps his hands. The funny thing is, it still makes him happy, so he's soothing himself. Sometimes I hear him cry in the middle of the night. A short time later, I'll hear him clapping his hands and then laughing. I think he's the funniest little baby and too adorable. Story 11. As a new mom, I wanted to make sure that I was protecting the baby and taking care of her properly. This included diapering, in which I wanted to make sure she didn't get diaper rash. I used baby powder quite liberally when diapering her to keep her skin protected and covered. My mother-in-law was quite thrilled to have her first grandchild. She was especially happy it was a girl since she had 3 boys and no daughters herself. Once the baby arrived, she volunteered to babysit whenever we wanted. We had a huge baby shower with lots of relatives and received lots of diapering products, including lotions, disposable and cloth diapers, diaper wipes, the works. So I thought I'd become an expert at diapering when my mother-in-law arrived for her first visit with the baby. Unfortunately, the baby was being fussy and crying when I brought her in the room. My mother-in-law sat on the couch and said it was no problem. She knew how to soothe a fussy baby. She held her against her chest with the baby's head on her shoulder and gently patted the baby's diapered bottom. Suddenly, a huge cloud of baby powder erupted from the sides of the baby's diaper, sending a big cloud into my mother-in-law's face and making her choke and cough. I sheepishly grinned and said, "I guess I used a little too much baby powder." Story 12. Okay, so when I was a little kid, maybe 2 or 3 years old, my mom asked me a question. She asked me to count to 10, and I did. Then she asked me to count to 10 backwards, meaning to count from 10 to 1. So I turned around backwards and counted from 1 to 10. I have another one, too. When I was even younger, like maybe even 2 years old, something funny happened in the kitchen. From even being 1 year old, I had an advanced vocabulary. My mom says that I was standing up in my high chair in the kitchen, and she said I would have to be careful or I'd fall down. Then I looked at her in my diaper and said, "Possibility." Isn't that cute? Story 13. Wheels Up, Heels Up. My colleague, Nell Minow, tells the story of her cousin newly moved to Chicago and pregnant with her second child. The doctor assured her that she wouldn't be delivering soon, and it was fine for her husband to leave for a 3-day trip to London. As she and her toddler watched the plane take off from O'Hare, she went into labor. She called the only person she knew in Chicago, her brother-in-law, to pick up her and the toddler and take her to the hospital. And between contractions, she tried to call the airline to find someone who could get a message to her husband. Halfway across the Atlantic, he was handed a message from the captain. The airline was great. As soon as he got to Heathrow, they put him on a return flight. Halfway across the Atlantic, for the second time in 8 hours, he received another note from the captain, this time with a small bottle of champagne. It said, "It's a boy." The next time she got pregnant, he did not leave her side. Story 14. While I was pregnant with my second child, my 2.5-year-old daughter grabbed some balloons that were lying there and stuffed them in her shirt and looked at me and with a big smile said, "Look, Mom, I look like you." She wouldn't take out the balloons from her shirt and walked around with these giant fake boobs for a long time. Story 15. Living on a farm, we have many closed-band radios, so we're easily able to communicate with each other. Well, it just so happens that we have one in the room next to my child's, and one night while putting her to bed and reading her a bedtime story, the radio went off. It was no big deal, just someone asking for a truck to dump some grain into, but my daughter, who was only 4 at the time, shot straight up, half asleep, from bed and goes, "Mom, something talks in here," while hazily looking around the room for the noise. Story 16. A funny story is one morning when my baby boy woke up and he was screaming and laughing because he was trying to catch mine and his daddy's attention. Once we both woke up, he came near us and smiled so big. A little after that happened, he started laughing because he was pooping. When we checked him to change his diaper, he left a huge mark behind. His entire pajama was stained with poop. Story 17. Note: lorry here refers to a truck. Big Frank was having his hair styled at the hairdresser's when a lorry smashed into a car outside. Dressed in a cape, his hair divided with aluminum clips, Frank, an ex-paratrooper corporal, raced out to the car and found the driver unhurt. The lorry driver, however, was slumped over the wheel unconscious. Big Frank lost no time in applying his Army-acquired CPR techniques, including mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. The lorry driver recovered consciousness several times, but kept passing out again. Soon the ambulance arrived with the paramedics and took over, and Frank returned to his barber's seat. "I just don't understand why he kept passing out," he said to the hairdresser. "I did everything they taught me." "Well, put yourself in the lorry driver's place," said the hairdresser. "He's driving down the street without a care in the world. The next thing he knows, he's waking up to see some big guy in a green cape with a head full of wires pounding on his chest and kissing him. You'd pass out, too." Story 18. Note: cracker here refers to a party favor. It's really a tiny fireworks. It opens with a loud pop or crack when pulled at both ends. Kids have their own ways of being funny. My son, who is 7 years old, was once given homework to prepare a few lines on Say No to Crackers for the school activity as Diwali festival was approaching. My son loves crackers, though he cracks them moderately only. When I tried helping him prepare these lines for the activity, he refused to memorize them, saying that I'm going against my own principles of telling him never to lie to anyone in life. He said since he loves crackers, he would not prepare any lines for such an activity. Later, when the activity happened in class, he spoke, "I love crackers, and hence I cannot lie and say that I will say no to crackers." The teacher, as well as his entire class, was amused and had quite a hearty laugh, and later on told me about it. Besides this, there was another incident. Once my son was going down the staircase. As soon as he reached the ground floor, the floor was empty and he slipped. To hold himself from slipping, he held hands with another girl who was standing there and playing. While my son could not save himself from falling, the poor girl slipped and fell along with him. It was quite a funny sight to watch as they both went bang on the floor together. Story 19. Kids and Food. My son was in the back seat of the car and he was eating raisins. I was driving and not paying attention, and I heard him start to yell, "Get out! Get out!" He had put the raisin in his nose and couldn't get it out. I had to pull over and help get it out. They then thought he was really funny. Story 20. I have a 2-year-old son. He really says the funniest things. Once he says something hilarious, we ask him to repeat it, and he says no, or he will repeat it. Today he went number 2 on his own, and I was terrified he went on the floor somewhere. He actually went in the toilet. I was ecstatic. We get to the drugstore for his sister, and he says, "Lollipop." The pharmacist laughs. I say to him, "How do you know you get a lollipop here?" He replies, "Lollipop." And guess what? The pharmacist puts 3 in the bag. I'm like, well. My son is playing on my mom's tablet and it dies. He says to his sister, "I want mommy phone." I say to myself, well, once he can go to the bathroom on his own, he thinks he can have what he wants. Ha! He keeps repeating that he wants my phone. Then we go get their dad and he says, "Hey, Daddy, lollipop." I tell his dad. He just laughs at him. David crosses his arms like he has an attitude at 2 years old and says under his breath, "Lollipop." Meanwhile, he hasn't finished the lollipop he's had for 30 minutes. Story 21. My 3-year-old stuck out her hand and said, "Look at the fly I killed, Mommy." Since she was eating a juicy pickle at the time, I thrust her contaminated hands under the faucet and washed them with antibacterial soap. After sitting her down to finish her pickle, I asked, with a touch of awe, "How did you kill that fly all by yourself?" Between bites, she said, "I hit it with my pickle." I couldn't stop laughing. Story 22. My cousin was 9 when my aunt adopted her. She fit into the family instantly, and it felt as though we'd always had her. During the first year, she got into a fight with her mom, my aunt. The next few nights, my aunt kept waking up freezing and couldn't figure out why. It turns out that my 9-year-old cousin was turning the heat down and unplugging my aunt's electric blanket. She called it her paybacks. Story 23. Once when my son was 2 years old and was potty training, I bought him a potty seat that goes on top of the regular toilet seat with a little cushion with Spider-Man on it. He was very interested in this new item he thought was a toy. So I let him play with it as it was new and clean to get familiar with it in hopes the toilet training would go smooth. Minutes after giving him his potty seat, I had to take a call and was momentarily distracted. As I heard my son start to cry, I saw he had put his potty seat over his head and turned it sideways, making it hard to take back off. I think he will remember that as the worst hat ever. Story 24. My brother-in-law has one kid who's 3 years old but very smart and mischievous. As the kid must have noticed that his parents are always talking on their phone every day, he also started showing interest. Every time when he sees his mom attending the phone, he would immediately rush to her and try to take it from her hands. He always tries the same thing on his dad when he's talking on his cell phone. It looks so funny sometimes. So now his father has bought him a toy dummy smartphone for the kid to keep him quiet and occupied, but he still insists on the very phone which his mom and dad use, as if he had realized that the phone given to him by his parents is not a genuine one. Now, the kid's parents are also very confused about how to make him quiet and happier. I think this generation's kids are very smart and have more intelligence than previous generation's kids. This generation's kids are more tech-savvy and simply love using it whether they know how to operate it or not. They're highly addicted to it. Just imagine what future lies ahead of this kid who's only 3 years old and loves all the tech gadgets. By the time he grows up a little, he'll have learned all the skills of using computers, laptops, tablets, smartphones, and other tech-related products. Story 25. Some funny and interesting things children do is play the role of adults. They dress like us, girls even make up like their mothers, and some of them look so funny when they sing in the mirror like their favorite singer. Once I caught my daughter when she was like 5 years old singing Barney show songs. That was so hilarious, and the gestures and the preparation she made of her costume were priceless. Another thing she used to do in a very, very funny way was falling asleep while eating in her high chair. Once we were having soup for supper and she was very little. We were eating quietly, and because of that, she started to get bored, although she was eating a lot. She started yawning, and then she began to fall asleep until she placed her cheek right in her bowl of soup. She woke up suddenly, and instead of crying, she started to laugh. Story 26. When my son was a preschooler, he used to mash words together or change them completely. We always said we should write them down. The two most clear are when his belly hurts and he told me he had a stomach ache, combo of stomach and tummy. The other is when my husband had congestive heart failure. When someone asked how his dad was, he told them he had a heart fart, his combo of heart and failure. Story 27. Kids like to learn new things and they love animals. A funny thing they do is making the sounds that animals do. For example, like cow, horse, cat, and chicken. Kids love to say things that their parents or other adults say. For example, saying baby to mom just because daddy does. Kids also like to play in the dirt when they're toddlers and they put everything in their mouth. This is really funny. Kids like to stay naked, sometimes in front of the guests. Kids try to be strong and lift things they can't, and it's funny when they get nervous about it. When a person gives a lemon to a kid, it's funny because they make a funny face and their whole body shakes. Kids draw funny pictures of people or animals or flowers. And when little kids try to sing songs, they raise their voice too loud. It's funny when kids cry about unreasonable things like, "Who ate my ice cream?" when they ate it. Story 28. Once I asked my brother to tell me a fruit name which is red in color. He answered, apple. I appreciated him and asked him to tell another fruit name which is red in color. He answered, another apple. Once my sister and I went to a zoo and there was a lion which was in a glass cage. The lion was roaring and showing its willingness to eat her. But my sister also roared, and she enjoyed seeing the lion. It was so funny to see that. Story 29. My little sister was at the doctor's office for her annual checkup. She had to be somewhere around 3 years old. The nurse was asking all the standard coordination-type questions, touch your nose, put your hands up, jump, etc. Being a healthy, capable little devil, she's doing everything fine. Then the nurse says, stand on one foot. My little sister looks at the nurse, looks down and hesitates. Then she walks over and stands on one of the nurse's feet. Story 30. Many years ago, when my daughter was very young, we were looking at a new house to buy. We all had a tour of the house, lounge, kitchen, back garden, garage, upstairs to 4 bedrooms and a bathroom, then downstairs to see the bathroom downstairs. It was a sunny and warm day, so we were there quite a while. We left the house and started talking in the front garden. When we were all there talking, the next-door neighbor walked past. They said hello. My daughter spoke up and asked, "Is that a granddad?" And we all silently smiled and laughed together so the neighbor didn't hear us, when in fact the granddad was a grandma. We all still laugh about it now. It's a day we will not let her forget, even though they have moved away now. Story 31. Here's a funny story about something my nephew did about 10 years ago. He wasn't even 1, but he was very advanced for his age. He talked and walked and did everything before the average age. One day we were at the mall with his dad, and we were looking to buy my nephew's mom a Christmas present. The mall was very busy with people, almost touching one another as they passed by. My nephew saw a grown woman that I guessed he thought was pretty. As she passed by, he smacked her on the butt. The lady turned around in shock and assumed that my nephew's dad did it, because why would a tiny baby do something like that? I was almost on the floor laughing. Another funny baby story is about my daughter. When she was tiny, just a few months old, she would always scream bloody murder at a certain time every day. I would get out of the shower and check on her, and every day she would scream. I couldn't figure out why. Until one day, I didn't take my shower at my regular time. I took it early in the morning instead of in the evening. And what do you know? She started screaming. Turns out, she was completely terrified of my wet hair. So after figuring that out, I'd wait until she was asleep in bed for the night to take my showers. Story 32. My son's 5th birthday was coming up, and he loved the Hulk. We were going to have a big party at home over the weekend, but I decided to take cupcakes to his kindergarten class also on his actual birthday. As we headed to the deli to get the cupcakes, he started screaming, "I want Hulk napkins! I want Hulk plates! I want green ice cream!" And I kept saying, "We're having a Hulk birthday party over the weekend. We can't afford 2 big parties. We're here to get cupcakes only, and I can't afford 2 parties." Again and again, I told him how I couldn't afford it. The day came to take the cupcakes to school, and that night his teacher called me. She was laughing almost uncontrollably and said, "I don't mean to embarrass you, but this is too good not to share." She proceeds to tell me, "At the end of the day, I set the cupcakes at each desk and then had the class sing happy birthday to Logan." She said Logan was sitting there pouting and she could tell he wasn't happy about something, when all of a sudden another little boy stood up and screamed, "I hate cupcakes! Why didn't your mother get a cake?" She said Logan shot up out of his desk, walked over to the other boy, shoved him down into his seat, screaming, "My mama can't afford a cake, so just sit down, shut up, and eat your damn cupcake." He's 22 now, and every year on his birthday, I still get him a Hulk cupcake to go along with the cake that I can afford now. Story 33. I was at the beach with a friend and her little boy. I believe he was about 2 years old at the time. He was running along the waterline when all of a sudden he fell down and face-planted right in the sand. Well, he immediately began to cry these crocodile tears, and my friend got up and ran over to him. She scooped him up and hugged him tight. He was still crying, but all of a sudden he stopped crying, and he looked over at me and gave me this look of an evil villain who's just tricked the hero. Then he began crying again. I'll never forget that look. He had my friend so wrapped around his little finger, she had no idea. Story 38. So one time I was at my friend's and my goddaughter was running around the house. She was being a silly girl. Her mom, my best friend, went outside and my goddaughter started freaking out. She wanted to be with her mom, but it was too cold for her to go outside. So the only way I could get her attention was by putting a bucket on my head and chasing after her. She was laughing like a crazy person the whole time. We did circles around the coffee table, out to the kitchen, back to the coffee table. Finally, I caught her and picked her up. She then took the bucket off my head and put it on her head. She looked so funny. This silly little girl wanted to chase me. So I put her down, and as soon as I did, she went running full speed into the bookshelf. I panicked, but she was laughing and had a huge smile on her face. Thankfully, that bucket saved her from smashing her head into the bookshelf, and when her mom came back in, she showed her the new bucket on the head trick. Story 35. Tonight, my 3-year-old was on the potty. Well, my 5-year-old decided he needed some encouragement. He leaned forward so my daughter looked into the toilet and saw a poop and goes, "You're doing great. You've already got one. Keep on going." And every time she heard a plop, she'd say, "Yay, good job." And he would respond, "Yay, I did it. Mommy, are you happy?" Story 36. Zuzu pets were some of the most popular toys of the year a while back, super hard to find on store shelves. We got our daughter some because I travel a lot and found them in various stores. She never even played with them. Sometimes just because it's popular doesn't mean everybody wants one, I guess. Story 37. One time I was working at a child care center and one child was continually misbehaving. Myself, along with other members of the staff, repeatedly had to say, "Connor, what were the directions?" We redirected him multiple times to prevent him from accidentally hurting himself or another child. A different child, a 5-year-old, kept overhearing us talk to Connor about his behavior. In the middle of working on a painting, the 5-year-old walked over and casually mentioned to me, "Connor likes to go to jail." Thinking I had misheard what he said, I asked him to repeat what he had told me. He again said, "Connor likes to go to jail." At this point, I was thinking maybe Connor was his mom's ex-boyfriend, or he had a crazy cousin named Connor who was in trouble. I asked him if he knew who Connor was. He said that yes, he did, and nonchalantly added, "That's the baby in my mom's tummy. He likes to go to jail." The 5-year-old then walked away and continued his painting. When I looked over at it, I noticed he was painting a picture of his family, including a stick figure mom with a bubble stomach to signify her pregnancy. Story 38. So one time I was at my friend's and my goddaughter was running around the house. She was being a silly girl. Her mom, my best friend, went outside and my goddaughter started freaking out. She wanted to be with her mom, but it was too cold for her to go outside. So the only way I could get her attention was by putting a bucket on my head and chasing after her. She was laughing like a crazy person the whole time. We did circles around the coffee table, out to the kitchen, back to the coffee table. Finally, I caught her and picked her up. She then took the bucket off my head and put it on her head. She looked so funny. This silly little girl wanted to chase me. So I put her down, and as soon as I did, she went running full speed into the bookshelf. I panicked, but she was laughing and had a huge smile on her face. Thankfully, that bucket saved her from smashing her head into the bookshelf, and when her mom came back in, she showed her the new bucket on the head trick. Story 39. My son Zachary is 3 years old. He's been a comedian since birth. He's always gotten sarcasm and always had a sense of humor. Recently, when it was cold and snowy, I said to him, "I don't like snow." He responded, "I like snow." I said, "I don't like the cold." He responded, "I like cold." I said, "Zachary, you're so contrary." He responded, "Mommy, I'm not contrary. You are contrary." Now, he's also started blaming his brother and others for things, for instance, passing gas or bowel movements. If he has an accident, he says, "Mommy, Daddy pooped his pants." My son is also tall and thin. He likes to jump in puddles, and today he jumped in puddles at school. His teacher changed him into pants I had in his bag that were a little big on him. I went to pick him up from school, and he headed to the car. Just as he arrived at the car, his pants fell down to his ankles, leaving him standing there half naked. He turned around, laughed, and told me, "Mommy, it's a full moon." He has an obsession with using the word poop and butt, and frequently swaps out words in common children's songs with poop. He went to a Pittsburgh Pirate game, also known as the Bucks, and as we chanted, "Let's go Bucks," he chanted, "Let's go butt cheeks." Story 40. My kids keep me in stitches. When my daughter was about 9, she stumbled into the kitchen and came out with a very concerned look on her face. She ever so seriously asked me what was wrong with the trash can. Puzzled, it took me a few minutes to realize she was holding trash in her hand, and I had to inform her that the trash can was not broken. I had just taken the bag full of trash out and forgotten to fill it with a fresh bag. Then just last week I told her to wash the dishes. Keep in mind that I use my dishwasher as a drying rack as I hand wash most of the time, so my kids are used to always grabbing a dish clean from the dishwasher. She washed a sink full of dishes, loaded them in the dishwasher, and turned it on. Confused, I asked her why she would run the dishwasher after hand washing, and she very matter-of-factly told me that since that's how I do it, she wanted to do it right. Can't fault her, I guess. Story 41. My son sleepwalks and pees on the kitchen floor. Luckily, it's always about the time I don't feel like mopping the floor again. My youngest daughter, she may be insane. She walks around asking everyone when they're having their baby. Literally everyone. This kid can have you doing crunches all night. Other books by Leroy Vincent. Finding Your Match, Fun Dog Days, Fun Dog Days Coloring Book, Funny Cat Stories, Heartbreak Hotel, Hilarious Children, Romance Regrets, Christmas Coloring Pages, Mystic Elves Coloring Pages. Hilarious Children, True Tales of Funny Kids Experiences by Leroy Vincent. Narrated by Susan Scher. Published by Revival Waves of Glory Books and Publishing. Copyright 2016.